Hey everyone, welcome to the Monday edition of the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. We're going to talk about the Steelers' offensive line, the one group the Steelers really didn't address at all in the draft. Does that show confidence in this group? We'll talk about them, the cornerbacks, and how the rest of the AFC North did in the draft, all here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello, welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. And as always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, this show is also brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Not only will they help you when you're injured in a car accident, they'll help you with your workers' compensation claims. They'll fight for the workers' compensation rights you deserve. Call them today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Ray, let's talk about the Steelers' offensive line a little bit in this because the Steelers in the last 2 years, the first 2 years of Omar Khan and Andy Weidel, they went all out to address the offensive line. They got Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu with their 2 first-round picks. They got Zach Frazier in the second round last year and Mason McCormick in the fourth round. And all 4 of those guys would have been starting last year had Troy Fautanu not been injured at the start of the season. And so now this year, they project to all be starters this year as James Daniels is gone from the guard position. Isaac Seumalo remains. They haven't made any other big signings at those positions. So you're assuming that over the first 2 drafts of Omar Khan, all those offensive linemen are about to be starters this year. What do you think it says that the front office is positioned themselves to be like, you know what, we're letting those guys be the players that are going to be taking the field come September?
Yeah, 5 offensive linemen in the past 2 drafts. You forgot to mention Spencer Anderson, who started a couple games before Mason McCormick took over for him last year. So that's a big investment, Chris, and it's not just early picks as well. Mason McCormick came in the 4th round, but they believe in these guys. And I thought Zach Frazier, really one of the top rookie offensive linemen in the NFL last year. I think he's going to be really solid in the middle. And to me, the biggest question marks, I think you're solid at guard as well with Isaac Seumalo as he enters the last year of his contract. And I think Mason McCormick will be solid as well. The big question for me is the bookends. How is Broderick Jones going to perform on the left side, where theoretically he should be better because that's his natural position? And Troy Fautanu, there's not really a lot of questions for me about Troy's ability. It's, can he stay healthy, right? He had a couple of injuries last year. Injuries kind of marked his career at Washington. The Steelers doctors signed off on his medicals before he was drafted, but Chris, that is a question that has followed him early in his career. So for me, 2 big question marks on the outside, one performance related, one injury related. I think the way those 2 guys perform this year is going to be the way the offensive line in the end is judged.
I agree. I think the big thing is they need these guys to pan out. I think that is one of the bigger stories of this year, maybe the biggest story of this year outside of quarterback. Everyone's looking at quarterback, but I think the Steelers are punting on quarterback to make their big move next year. But it will not matter as much if this offensive line is still trying to figure out if it's even going to be good. I think this is the year where they don't have to be elite. They don't even have to be top 10. They just gotta be, I think, good to above average. Like, just show that, hey, you're growing in the right direction. Broderick Jones is finding his place. Troy Fautanu is finding his place. Zach Frazier's getting better. Mason McCormick's getting better. If those things can happen and they can come together as a unit, and it takes time. Like, offensive lines on either side, D-line or O-line, these are the more longer-term developing positions because of the size and the strength and the adjustments that it takes to get used to the NFL game. That is not always a guaranteed thing that's going to work out right away. But they need to start seeing this soon so that they can see other parts of this offense start to open up.
Yeah, I think what the Steelers are doing is they're betting on the pedigree, right? I mean, that's right. You've invested a lot of resources into that position, and now it's time to see results. Chris, I mean, whether it was the offensive line's fault or you want to lay some blame on the running back, in the end, it's always going to be a little bit of both. The Steelers running backs averaged only 0.0 yards per carry last season. I think only one or two other teams in the NFL had fewer yards per carry last year, Chris. And then you go to the pass protection. And again, we could play the blame game all we want with Russell Wilson holding on to the ball. That undoubtedly happened. He was definitely responsible for some sacks. But when you give up sacks at the rate the Steelers did last year, that's going to come with criticism for the offensive line as well. So, it's up to Pat Meyer. Andy White on Omar said, here, Pat, we're giving you these guys, shape them, mold them, give me a good offensive line. Certain things have come into play, right? Injuries, we talked about. Broderick playing out of position, we talked about. Now, finally, we have Broderick on the left side. We have Troy Fautanu, where they think he's going to be really well suited to excel in the NFL. Now it's time for these guys to go play and to make that come to fruition.
I think that's the big thing here. They need to bring it together, and it needs to be part of the run game, right? Because, we talked to Arthur Smith last year. He said, whenever it was talking about the Steelers' run game, he said he's like a dependable old truck. Like it takes a few turns to get it going. Once you get it going, it's slow and steady, and it gets the job. They don't need to be slow and steady anymore. This needs to be the group that's going to make this offense be dangerous. Because the past several years, I think that they've gotten away with strong running back play who's been able to just take abuse from, when you look at Najee Harris got hit the line of scrimmage almost every single play. He was always under assail. And, I thought it was a really big strength of his to keep going and not have to come out of games too often or not miss games because of injuries or things like that. And then also the fact that he protected the football. But now you need to be in a position where, okay, you've gotten through those years because you hadn't been investing in offensive line and you were waiting for some of these investments to pan out. Now you need to start seeing those dividends come back to paying, because now when you got Kaleb Johnson and Jaylen Warren, not that Jaylen Warren, I don't think can take the amount of abuse that Najee Harris did. Again, they're just differently built backs. I think Kaleb Johnson, he's much more similarly built to Najee Harris, so he can, but you got that guy not to be a tank that took on a lot of hits. You got him to be explosive, quick, and a playmaker in space who can turn 2-yard gains into 8-yard gains and can turn and can take advantage of good blocking with a young offensive line. That's what you want to see from this group, because then all that pressure and wondering, will the quarterback pan out? Will they be able to? All that's out the window. Now you can focus on the fact that you could run the football and and run the football efficiently to keep defenses on their heels.
And listen, for better or worse, it doesn't matter if Aaron Rodgers signs or if Mason Rudolph is the quarterback in 2025. You are not going to have those built-in yards from an RPO scheme like you had in the first 6 games last season with Justin Fields. And I think that was a big part of why that running game was good early and then really kind of just plodded along late, right? They were okay, but they weren't as efficient in the running game because they didn't have Justin Fields to just be that athlete and to go out there and to get those yards. So at the very least, Chris, I think Arthur Smith and Pat Meyer can lay out a blocking scheme. We're going to do it this way. Aaron Rodgers and Mason Rudolph, we're not going to be calling RPOs for these guys. And I think it's even more so now on the shoulders of the offensive line to get it done. You're going to have to pave the way for Jaylen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, and Kaleb Johnson. They're going to run the outside zone scheme more, which is what Arthur Smith wants to do. So things are lining up well for them. They finally got the back that fits the scheme. They got the pieces in place. Now go out and put it together and put a winning product on the field.
Agreed entirely. I want to talk about another position that they didn't wait until the 7th round to address, and that's the cornerback spots. I want to get to that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast, how that handles that. That's next here on the North Shore Drive podcast, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates, who also do workers' compensation. If you've ever been hurt on the job, you need to know who decides when you're better and who decides when your treatment is over and who decides when your benefits are over. There to surprise you, it's the insurance company's doctors. If that doesn't make you feel great because you don't have someone on your side there, you get someone on your side by calling Edgar Snyder Associates today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. Because when you call Edgar Snyder Associates, they'll be sure to fight for the workers' compensation rights that you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, the Steelers didn't address, and we talked about this a little bit last week with the point that Mike Tomlin kind of said, like, hey, we looked at the draft pool and we said that we should sign a wide receiver and corner. And they traded for DK Metcalf. They signed Darius Slay. So clearly they weren't as wild about the cornerback position. But now this does put an emphasis on their guys to work this year and even past Darius Slay, because obviously he's a 1-year rental. You're bringing him in for short term, kind of like you did Patrick Peterson, kind of like how Donte Jackson just worked out. But this is also an ultimate chance for Joey Porter Jr. to prove he is the guy, as well as Cory Tice to prove maybe he can be the guy next to Joey Porter Jr. What do you make of the cornerback room as it stands heading into OTAs and minicamp that are coming up here in a few weeks?
Yeah, I think there's much to be proven there. And I think bringing in Darius Slay, you're bringing in an established veteran that they still think has something left in the tank. But if you remember, a couple of years ago, they brought in Patrick Peterson to mentor Joey Porter. And I think the same thing can be said now. Darius Slay has played a lot of football in this league. He knows the game inside and out. If they can get Joey Porter back on track, I thought he was solid as a rookie. I thought he took maybe a little bit of a step back last year. Some of the grabbing penalties that were a concern coming out of Penn State, those resurfaced, this past year. What was it, Chris? Was it the Cincinnati game where they just kept happening?
Yeah, at least 4, maybe 5.
Yeah. So, that he's got to get that taken out of his game. And I think having a guy like Darius Slay around him in the spring, they'll be on campus at St. Vincent for 5-6 weeks, having him present there, coach that out of him and get him back on track, because for better or worse, even though he's labeled as a second-round pick, he was the number 32 overall pick in that draft, Chris. They need that guy to step up and to eventually become the leader of that room. They need him to warrant a second contract, because if he doesn't pan out, Chris, then you're just starting over again, and you're just doing the whole thing where you're signing free agents year to year like they have been. So get Joey Porter back on track. I think if they do that, that room has a chance to enjoy a little bit more success.
No, I feel you on that, and I think that's the thing is getting him on track. And I think this is what's going to be the challenge for Joey Porter Jr. Right? Like, so many times when he committed those penalties, there was no reason to. Like, you look at the way he was covering, even Jamar Chase, and I get the pressure of like, oh man, I might have gotten beat here, so let me grab, let me like reach. It's like an instinct, like, let me just be a little bit more physical here. But there's so many times he's in position, you don't need to grab the guy. Play the ball. I think Joey Porter Jr., one thing he has done so well is his footwork, his placement. He can run with guys. He's not a slow cornerback. He's not non-explosive. He is quick. He is explosive. He can do these things. He can be in position. And he's also smart. Like, I've seen Joey Porter Jr. counter what receivers are trying to do to get off the line clean on him. And he thinks through the game so well. But I think it might just be like an instinctive thing or a reflexive thing where he's just like, he reaches and tries to do something when he doesn't need to. And I think that's where Gerald Alexander, that's what the Steelers, they need to see him not do that, because when you do that and it throws a flag, it wastes all the good work that you put into play to be the good cornerback that I think he can be.
Yeah, and if they play the way they want to play, let's face it, they drafted those big, tall, rangy corners so they can let those guys play man on the outside. And when they're playing well, that's great. You can do that. When they're not playing well, then you have to adjust. You got to do more zone. Like last year with Donte Jackson, he was more of a zone corner. So just out of circumstances, they had to play a little bit more zone than I think they wanted to. But, Joey Porter was brought here for a reason. They wanted him to lock down one side of the field. Now they're hoping Darius Slay can do that on the other. If they could do that, that opens up a whole, part of the trick bag for the signal callers, for Terrell Austin and Mike Tomlin, in terms of how you want to deploy your other defenders. So I think it's a big part of what they want to do. Those guys are here for a reason, and I think this year those guys need to go out and execute so they can run that defense the way they want to run that defense.
Agreed entirely, because that's the other thing. Cornerback in the Steelers defense nowadays is press, run, bump and run man coverage. Don't let the receivers get clean. And I see the vision for it, right? I get why you want to play this way, because we think back to some of the Steelers years. They did zone coverage with their corners so much because they didn't have the top tier cornerback play. And not that they have top tier cornerback play right now, but you see the prototypes they're getting, the Joey Porter Juniors, the Cory Tices, these longer physical guys that can stick receivers at the line of scrimmage, but also run with them to keep up with them. I see the vision as far as you want corners that just press you and run with you all over the field. And so that as quarterbacks try to fit it into tight passing windows further down the field, they're having to fit into tighter spots, which create better chances for turnovers, but also force them to hold on to the ball a little bit longer. And when you hold on to the ball a little bit longer, who benefits from that? The pass rushers. And that's what the Steelers want to be, a team that can play sticky coverage, get the pass rush going, stuff the run. You do those three things, you become a very good, even a great defense. So a lot of that does hang on the cornerbacks being able to do it. That's why I think it's going to be interesting to see if Slay, Gerald Alexander, if they can help out Joey Porter Jr. If they do, and him and Cory Tice become the duo for long term, the Steelers could be in a great position defensively, knowing that they don't got to reinvest at cornerback right away.
Yeah, and listen, it doesn't work if your top corner, the guy you want to be the cornerstone of your secondary, if he's second guessing himself, Chris, and he doesn't know, well, can I run with this guy, or do I have to arm bar him and maybe hold him a little bit to slow him down? Your scheme's not going to work if he's doing that, if he's not totally confident in him. So I think everyone remembers Hard Knocks, Mike Tomlin talking to Joey Porter, basically saying, I know you're not happy now, but you are going to be the guy down the road. Well, come 3 months from now, 4 months from now, we are going to be down the road. We're going to have to see Joey Porter be the best version of himself if the Steelers defense is going to take a step forward in 2025.
Absolutely. I want to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take a look around the NFL and look at the AFC North and how they drafted. And I want to get Gray's thoughts on how those drafts were assembled, what it does to the Steelers competition. We'll do that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But first, I'll remind you the show is also brought to you by UFC Gym. Pittsburgh, are you ready to train like a champion? UFC Gym has everything for total body health under one roof. They have group classes from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to Zumba, personal training, cardio, weights, cryotherapy, infrared saunas, and more, all for an unbeatable price. Not sure where to begin? All members get a starter session with an expert coach to help map out your fitness plan. Your first visit is on us. Drop in with free parking at Market Square or the waterfront and follow UFC Gym Pittsburgh on social media. Train different, feel unstoppable at UFC Gym Pittsburgh. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's talk a minute here about the NFL draft from the perspective of the other teams. Let's lead off with the Cleveland Browns, because they undoubtedly got the draft started with a bang. They had the second overall pick. They could have picked Travis Hunter. They trade back to the Jaguars to get a first-round pick for next year. They get Mason Graham, the defensive tackle that I had going to the Jaguars at fifth overall. Behind Mason Graham, they get Carson Schweschinger, a top 100 linebacker that I had on my big board. Right after him, they get Quinshon Judkins, the Ohio State running back. They actually got him ahead of Travion Henderson. Then they got tight end Harold Fannin. Then they got kind of crazy because, with the quarterback situation. They went and got Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback out of Oregon. Then they doubled down at running back by getting Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee. I really liked him. But then they went and got Shedeur Sanders in the fifth round with their last pick of the draft. So you get two quarterbacks, two running backs, a tight end, and a defensive tackle. How did you feel about how the Browns went about this draft process?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, Chris, like what they did at quarterback just kind of overshadowed everything else. But I think Mason Graham is he's the prototypical, he's not, maybe not the high ceiling guy, but you're going to get, what you're going to get with Mason Graham. That guy's going to be a solid pro for many, many years in the NFL. And I think he's going to be a stalwart for that defensive line. I think he's going to complement their edge people too, specifically Myles Garrett. I mean, I think that's a great pick. How do you not like the Judkins pick, right? I mean, you're coming off a year where you kind of know you have to move on from Chubb. Terrible what's happened to him with the injuries, but there was going to come a time they had to replace him, and I thought they got one of the top running backs in the draft to do that. But everything is clouded because no one knows what they're doing at quarterback. I mean, Chris, by the time they get to the regular season, they cut down the 53-man roster. I think either Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett is going to be cut or traded because you're not going to cut either of your two draft picks,
right?
Unless they find a way to cut Shedeur Sanders and have him start his career on the practice squad. I don't know how that works out. So their offseason quarterback plan, really, when you look at it, it's probably worse than the Steelers in doing something. But I think the shame is I think they did some good things in the draft. And you should. Listen, when you're picking as high as the Browns,
you better.
Don't screw it up. And they didn't screw it up early. They screwed it up late. So I think it was a good draft for them. But obviously the quarterback situation just throws a whole monkey wrench into how you evaluate that.
Look, Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson by themselves, I had as two of the better running backs in this draft class. And so getting both of them, I think, was a win on their part. Adding Mason Graham, I'm not a big Schlesinger guy, but adding Mason Graham, those alone would be a really good draft haul, in my opinion. Let's switch to the Bengals here real quick. The Bengals, they went and got a guy that you did in your very first mock. You mocked to the Steelers, Shemar Stewart, the edge rusher out of Texas A&M. They got him in the first round. Second round, they went linebacker Demetrius Light. Lots of linebackers in the AFC North. Dylan Fairchild, offensive lineman from Georgia in the third. Barrett Carter, another linebacker from Clemson in the fourth. Jalen Rivers, offensive lineman in the fifth out of Miami. And then in the sixth round, they went and got running back Taj Brooks out of Texas Tech. I thought it was interesting. They added in the offensive line. They added a little bit on defense to bulk up. But Ray, I think this team still needs help protecting Joe Burrow. And I don't think that they've done enough to address that.
Yeah, Fairchild went in the third round. I think a lot of people maybe had him going later, but I'm sure their scouts are okay with where they eventually got him. He's a guard, though. I mean, he's not a guy that is going to be on the edge, I don't think, and be a protector for Joe Burrow. So I understand what they're doing with Stewart. I think the thought is probably down the road. I don't know how it's going to work out this year, but Hendrickson probably isn't going to be a Bengal for much longer beyond the 2025 season. And, you take Stewart, a guy with tons of potential, and you hope he can become that next guy. But, Chris, that is a big bet, right? Because he didn't have the production at Texas A&M. I believe in Shemar Stewart. I think in the right system, he can be a really good pro. Now it's up to the Bengals to see if they can get that out of him.
I agree. I think that's the big thing there is they need to get help on the defensive side of the ball because the defense was terrible. I know that some people are kind of sitting there thinking, well, wait a second. They need help on the defense because that's the unit that was holding them back. The offense was fine last year. Like, look, the offense was fine last year, but Joe Burrow did a lot of really good job of running for his life. And I don't know if you want to have that going up again. I also am not sure that these are the things that solve the problems on defense because they had problems in the secondary too. They got a lot of issues in Cincinnati, man. Like as much as everyone's excited about the fact that they kept Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, I am not feeling great about their defense or their offensive line. And those are the two weaknesses that sunk them last year. Again, I keep reminding people in the 5 years they've had Joe Burrow, they've made the playoffs twice. So I don't know if they're doing the right things over there. We'll see if that draft class pans out. But certainly they address defense. They addressed O-line a little bit later. But we'll see if it's enough with the additions they made there. But let's talk about the division leaders because I think that there's a lot of people that might say that this might have been the best draft class of the year simply because of the amount of draft picks the Ravens had. But they get Malaki Starks, the safety out of Georgia. Some people had him ranked as their top safety. I had him as my second best. In the second round, they get Mike Green, an edge rusher out of Marshall, a guy who I had slotted as like the 15th best player in the draft, but fell because of the accusations of sexual harassment from years ago. I think these aren't open cases per se. They're just things that kind of just are known about, but aren't being pursued. But that made him fall there. Then they get Emory Jones, an offensive lineman out of LSU in the third round. They get Teddy Buchanan, linebacker out of California in the fourth. And then there's just a run of fifth and sixth round picks. Carson Vincent, Bilal Cohn, Tyler Loop, LeJante Wester. My favorite of these picks, Aeneas Peebles, defensive tackle out of Virginia Tech. He was one of my late round Steelers that I thought the Steelers should be looking at. Then Robert Longerbeam and Garrett Dellinger. But the big picks for me here, Malaki Starks, Mike Green, immediate guys that I think they can help right away. The Ravens got torched a lot on the deep passing game. Malaki Starks is at least a safety that can plug in next to Kyle Hampton and could make them one of the best safety combinations in the NFL if Starks lives up to advertisement, because Kyle Hamilton's already a bad man.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it seems like Mike Green is a boom or bust kind of pick, right? They could look great by getting him early in the second round, or that could be one of those picks where you look back on and, oh, okay, I see why 32 teams passed on him. There really were concerns about his character. So that one is going to be – that might be the linchpin for this Ravens draft class. And the other thing, I like the Starks pick. I think he's a really good player. But safeties have kind of been like what the Steelers did with Minkah Fitzpatrick, right? They invested a lot of money in him. But if you're an offense, you want to avoid safeties, you could do that. You don't have to throw – to Kyle Hamilton's side of the field. And, now they're going to have two very highly touted safeties. I would imagine teams are going to want to run against them now. You have two high pedigree guys in the back, guys who could turn you over and change football games. To me, if I'm facing the Baltimore Ravens now, I want to pound them in the running game, and I want to get them with short stuff in the passing game. So it's always going to be a chess game. The NFL game in 2024 for defenses was keep a lid on it. We'll see if the offenses try to press this year and try to get more big plays. But, I like the Starks pick, but just the way the NFL game trended in 2024, it just kind of makes me wonder about the value of those picks, especially when you take a guy like Starks in the first round.
I'm right with you there. I think that the Ravens, they got their own issues up front. I think that they're banking on their front guys like Madubuike, like Roquan Smith. They want those guys to hold it down. And heck, adding Mike Green is a guy that, like you said, boomer bust. If he works out, he could really save the edge rusher position for them and be a force for them that they don't have to pay for some years. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how does that work out. And the fact that those first two picks are on defense, maybe it's a sign that they feel like their offense has done enough they've added enough on offense to work with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, because I was wondering about, hey, do they invest more in that offensive line? Do they get another playmaker for Lamar Jackson? Any of those type of things? Turns out they're not going to. So I think it's going to be interesting, but I think maybe a theme that we look across the board here, when you look across the board, the first two picks for the Browns, defense. The first two picks for the Bengals, defense. The first two picks for the Ravens, defense. So you look at that. The Steelers are funny enough. They were the only team in the AFC North not to make their their second pick, at least a defensive player. They get Kaleb Johnson, but they also invested at Derek Harmon in the defensive line. I think it's an interesting trend that you see there this year.
Well, look at the quarterbacks in the North. You got Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson that you have to contend with. And then, all these teams are looking to the playoffs as well. You got to contend with Patrick Mahomes. You got to contend with Josh Allen. If the Chargers ever figure it out, you got to contend with Ben Herbert. Or Justin Herbert, excuse me. I was thinking of
you're fine.
The former Wisconsin edge rusher. But yeah, I mean, it's all about, once you get to the playoffs, it's all about stopping people. And I think the Ravens and the Bengals are trying to figure that out. They haven't been able to get over the hump to get to the Super Bowl recently. And I think now they're trying to address that with these draft picks.
Absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see how this pans out. Rookie camps start at the end of this week. We will keep you up to date with those updates here on the North Shore Drive podcast, because that's certainly something that's going to be coming up. We'll be back throughout the week because we still have a lot to discuss as far as how the Steelers are. But in the next episode on Wednesday, we're going to have an interview. Actually, we have DJ Thomas Jones, the Steelers undrafted free agent tight end out of South Alabama. He'll be joining the show. We'll have him and Ray on the show here on Wednesday. Be sure to tune into the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. We'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.